So it's been a long week. I've got some videos I wanted to upload, but I was mostly focused on my sleep schedule and getting prepared. I did not expect this event to be this long. I don't know why. I mean, part of me did, but it was long. I was live till like 4 a.m. Thank you for those of you that hung out with me all the way from going live at 6:30 p.m. I've got a lot of posts, so you may see a lot of double posts in the next week as I try to get the content I normally want to get out on this channel out. And today I want to talk a little bit about my reaction to the showcase event. And then as a separate video, I want to talk about my reaction to the live letter. Brian and I have posted over on Work to Game our summary of everything that was gone over that 2 hours. And then we've also talked about what was gone over in the live letter. And then we kind of bounced off of each other, but I think it's 2 hours long and our videos are not. So there's just too much to process here. So I wanted to just kind of just get it out and kind of share my reaction in case anybody hasn't had a chance to kind of go through this event and just wants to know kind of how the feeling of being there was. Obviously you can go look at the feature list, but like, what was the tone behind this? I think we'll just start off at the beginning. Endwalker, we got a chance to see the trailer. The trailer is now live over on YouTube. And I think knowing that we're now going to the moon, getting a chance to kind of see some of the characters that we didn't know what would happen with 5.5555555. I think there's some excitement there. I was really excited to see them show off the new job. I was hoping they would do this. It does need to be a healer, and I'm excited that we got a fourth healer. This does split the healers into two shield healers and two traditional like direct healers. I think that from a balance standpoint, that is going to kind of put some pressure on the meta to do we need one of each in 8-man content when we talk about Savage Extreme Ultimate. I'm excited to play it. I don't think this fixes healers on its own. I think a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to play that job now. But like we said the same about Dancer. We said the same about Samurai. Like we said the same about Gunbreaker. We said the same about Red Mage. Long term, it levels out. Everybody tries it at the beginning and then it fades very quickly. And we do see the other jobs come back into the mix. So this isn't single-handedly adding this job on its own does not fix the imbalance of healers. How hard healing is compared to everything else, how fun healing is compared to everything else, those are the things that determine how many people are willing to do it long-term. Playing a new job will be fun at first. It starts at level 70, starts in Limsa. All you have to do is purchase Endwalkers to get access to it. And so, like, yes, I'm excited about it, but I want to temper those expectations just a touch in that it's not going to fix everything. I'm personally very excited because I've been leveling White Mage in my weekly streams with Xandri, where I'm healing while she tanks. And so hopefully my White Mage is nice and settled at cap, and now I'll at least have a shield healer just in case my other two that are down at level 30 don't get there before the expansion. So very, very cool. It looks awesome. It looks beautiful. Excited to see kind of what the lore behind it is. How do we justify where it came from? It's called Sage. I think somebody said Alphino and Alisae's dad or somebody was a Sage, and so there may be some logic behind why that was who got to be Sage the first time it was shown to us. We'll obviously get to know a lot more in the May 15th and 16th FanFest event. But I think mostly what I was excited about is to know where we're going, and I think for me, having just gotten into story with Shadowbringers and is now going back through ARR, knowing that 6.0, knowing that the initial story serving is going to be the wrap-up of the Heidel and Zodiark change. They showed off some Ascian things. They said the word La Habrea. So without talking too much spoiler, obviously I'm only capable of spoiling so much. I think that there's a real excitement and a real urgency for me to be through all of the story for an actual playthrough of the story. As a longtime player that did a lot of story skipping, there's a pressure for me to get my EU character all the way through not only ARR, but also Heavensward, Stormblood, and then maybe I do another play of Shadowbringers going into this expansion so that I can be part of that 6.0 story, because it's going to wrap itself up in 6.0. I think that's a big shift, and I do have questions about like, how do you retain players through that? Because now, why stick around if that's the end of the story? So how do they then kind of cliffhanger that to get us into the next point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5? Is that a is that a 3-part story arc, and then point 4 and 5 takes us into the next expansion. Where is the hype portion? The traditional formulas worked very well, right? We tell the bulk of a story, we finish out that story over point 1, 2, 3, and then we begin the hype cycle with point 4, point 5. That's worked very well in the past, so a change like this is massive, and it speaks to the long-term health of this game, that they would be willing to jack with the formula after such a critically acclaimed and successful expansion. It's very easy for games to become comfortable when they have a really good run. It's one of the reasons we see long-established titles start to feel stale after a while, is to continue taking risks is very, very risky when you're on top, and very, very scary. So I think the storytelling changes and the fact they're willing to kind of end some things is very respectful of it, instead of just dragging it out and cashing that paycheck. So I'm really excited for it. I'm really nervous as well. I'm sure it'll be an emotional journey, and I just want to make sure I'm as invested as possible. So if, like me, anybody's been a story skipper, maybe this is the time to, at the very least, go and start watching lore videos, hanging out in people like Ethos' stream, making sure you've got a general understanding, because you're being told now that you have an opportunity to watch what will be the last season of Breaking Bad. And so knowing that prior to the beginning of the season, it's a good time to, if you're ever going to be interested in story in this game. You are not required to be interested in story in this game. It has a lot of great aspects to it. Story is just part of that. Yes, if you want to enjoy the complete aspect, you need to play a little PvP. You need to try a little Savage. You need to do a little crafting. You need to play story to have a complete, broad understanding of the game, and not just be empathetic towards other players, but actually understand what everybody goes through. But the game is a big buffet, and if you don't want to eat at one part, it doesn't mean you don't get your money's worth. It doesn't mean you don't leave feeling satisfied. But if story is something you've always been like, I keep meaning to try that, this does tell us that between now and fall of 2021, you should probably start kind of making an attempt to get through that with New Game Plus, or with a new character, or whatever. It doesn't have to be a new character now that we know data center visits are a thing. So we know now that we're going to be able to kind of jump data centers. We'll have to log out and log in, like anybody if you've ever had a character on multiple data centers. When I play my EU character, I have to kind of log out and go to change data center and then log back in. It'll be some kind of process through that. I imagine they're basically opening up kind of a server transfer type feature. So we'll kind of see how that works out. The fact that they did that, the fact that they're removing the belt slot to make room for new armory chest stuff, the fact that they're doing a stat squish, the fact that they're rolling out 4K to PS5, and they're doing the beta with April 13th. The fact that the CEO came out and said Yoshida's going to be on the project for a long time in a leadership role. We don't know if that's in the same size role that he's been on, where he himself has split himself into 14 jobs, if you will, and so we don't know if he's starting to kind of cede some of those roles, but it's a good sign for the long-term health of this game, and I think that this is what tells me they're not done investing in Final Fantasy XIV. So if you're fearful, should I continue investing in this game? Now more than ever, I say, yeah, just get started. And if you want to be there for the beginning of this is going to be quite the spectacle. Knowing now it's going to wrap up at the end of that 6.0, there is a very real pressure on whenever that September date is announced, plan on, avoiding spoilers or taking time off work or whatever that thing is to be there. And if you're a new player or you're considering coming back to the game, you don't, in my opinion, you don't want to, if possible, be somebody who's halfway through Heavensward while we're pushing through 6.0. So that really means, like, when do I get started? Right now. So that's very exciting. We are going to, I think, when people said we were going to Garlemald, I was like, yeah, let's go to Garlemald. And they're like, well, we could go to, an island or whatever, something like that, an area where we're going. Okay, that could be cool. Another continent could be cool. Well, we could go to the moon. Oh, that could be cool. And they were like, yeah, let's just do all of it. Let's do everything. Let's go to all the places. I'm very excited about that. They showed off the first Beast Tribe, but without knowing kind of what the rewards are and all that and how that fits into the story, I don't know if I'll engage with it. Beast Tribes for me are about the reward and about who it is. There are certain groups in Shadowbringers that they never got to be a Beast Tribe. I would have loved to see a Beast Tribe around... there's an older person that we get to visit with throughout that has a tie to a significant warrior in Shadowbringers, and I would have liked for that to be a Beast Tribe. There's a group within the final zone of Shadowbringers that I think we had enough of an area developed for them to have a Beast Tribe, and that could have explained some lore to us. There's, some some chances to look back into history and things like that with various groups we've touched on throughout Shadowbringers. Certain technological groups have had a chance to kind of show their faces. So without spoiling too much there, like there were groups that didn't get to be Beast Tribes that I would have liked to be. The people who did get chosen to be Beast Tribes, of course, they have their place, but for me, seeing the Beast Tribe, it's like, okay, but I still have questions. Like, I don't know if I'm going to drop everything to do that Beast Tribe or not. Seeing the dungeons and the Alliance raid, knowing that's all going to be original content to 14, I am very excited about that. While I would be excited to know what the next crossover event is, I want that to feel like that's additional content, not taking the place of content, especially if this is our last go round. Especially if, like I just described, like, I'm going to have questions. I want as many forms of content focused inward, focused on 14 as possible. That's just my personal take. I want to know that there's as many opportunities to keep me from asking questions. And so Pandemonium, whatever the Alliance raid series is, the dungeons, which seem to be across all of the zones based on the artwork, that's really, really exciting. I love that they're giving some PvP love. I am really thrilled to see them not give up on that content. I either think they should just give up altogether, or they should do it to it. And it feels like they're going with the second one. It feels like they're saying, you know what, let's do new mode, let's lift role restrictions. I know Desparius in his video about PvP has kind of talked about, you know, how they should go back to it's harder because you've tried to draw people in and you haven't done it. In my opinion, it's one or the other. So you've got to do something. So you've either got to lean harder the way you're going and invite more people in, more rewards, a mode that better scales to the number of people actually interested in this, and easing of role restrictions and things like that, making it where more people can get in sooner, faster, better, and have a reason to. Or you have to go the other way and just make it a narrow part of the community and let it be that thing. Stop inviting everybody in and say, you know what, let's not ask ourselves what all players want from PvP. Let's ask ourselves what the people who are pushing through PvP now want from PvP. They're already making the effort in a piece of content that feels underwhelming much of the time. If people are waiting 120 minutes for a match, what are those people wanting from it? And let's just lean into them and forget about everybody else. And I think it's one of the two. You know, you either need to lean into the people that want this, or you need to really open it up and say, how do we get more people in this more often? And if you're going to do it as finite rewards, things we can get, what we've learned from things like Castrum as a most recent example, is if you do rewards, that has to be something continually added to, or once that loot table is completed, or at least what everybody wants from the loot table is completed. If it has 10 items and people only want 6 and they get all 6, once they've gotten everything they wanted from that content, it still dies. So that's a very extrinsic way of rewarding, and if that external reward is very finite in nature, then once I have it, if there's no internal, just intrinsic, baked in, just fun aspect where I'll just do it to do it, then we've seen with Castrum where, like, if there's actively something pushing against doing it, or if there's a better place for you to be, you end up letting that content die, and the people who haven't done it yet pay that penalty. So hopefully deal with that. They are continuing the trust system, which is interesting. We've seen it kind of slowly progress from, we had companions, and then we had squadrons, which allowed us to go into dungeons, but that was kind of separate from the way, like, your retainers can go out and do ventures. And then we went off into trusts, and that, like, elaborated on the squadron aspect and added, like, a lore component. And, you know, that paired with the fact that we moved from job quests to role quests really allowed more of a deeper, broad storytelling and less on, like, your story and more on, like, the story. And so to see that continue, to see them add Estinian, I just mostly have questions. They said it's going to be available in more types of content. What does that mean? Does that mean fates? Does that mean dungeons? Does that mean trials? Does that mean it's backwards compat? You know, what does that mean? I mostly just have questions. So, like, I don't really, they didn't answer anything. They just kind of opened Pandora's box and said, well, that's open now. And we moved on. And speaking of that, they did the same with Golden Saucer. Golden Saucer is a piece of content that we very rarely see updated in a big, meaningful way. It is fun to go get lost in, but giving us a continued reason to go there is like, oh, they added a new one of the fates, whatever the gates, there it is. You know, and then it kind of dies for a bit. they added a new reward, so everybody's doing their fashion report each week until they can buy the new reward, and then it kind of dies for a bit. So seeing a new game getting added to that, we don't know what it'll be. I personally hope it's blitzball, but I know there's a number of people that want snowboarding. I'm sure there's a number of things that people would want. I personally have been asking for blitzball. I think it would have paired really well with the introduction of swimming into the game with Stormblood. And in the media tour for Shadowbringers, they said the only reason they hadn't implemented blitzball or snowboarding was another one mentioned, was that they had multiple ideas of how it could be implemented, and none of them seemed to satisfy everybody on the team. So they were worried that they were gonna kind of make it worse for people, not better, which I think is why Blue Mage became a limited job, is they couldn't find a way that satisfied everybody. I mean, everybody's like, well, Blue Mage is really easy as an unlimited job. You just do it like this. That's how you want Blue Mage, but there's somebody else that wants it a different way. And so limited job allowed them to try to put more ways. In the process, they, of course, pissed a lot of people off too. That's why I think it's interesting we didn't hear anything about limited jobs yet. I expected there to be a limited job during this expansion, and there wasn't. At one point, I expected maybe as a long stretch we'd have 2 limited jobs out of this expansion. And instead, we're still just looking at Blue Mage, and they didn't mention anything about limited jobs for next expansion. So I don't know if that's just based on engagement numbers. I don't know what that is, but I thought it was interesting that we haven't seen anything about that word limited coming back. Speaking of limited content, housing is going to be in 6.1 for Ishgard. That is going to be the new zone. It's going to be traditional housing where there will be a limited thing, but we're getting island sanctuaries, which is going to be these farms, ranches, something like that. So maybe that takes away a lot of people's needs. It might not satisfy the cosmetic or the social aspect of having a house, but it might help take the edge off of people who are like, I just want it so I can grow my own onions. I just want it so I can kind of invest in casual building style content. So if it ends up being kind of like a private dome and enclave that I can grow in, I can let my minions roam free in, something like that, depending on how that's implemented, that could be really exciting. I'm interested in at least trying it. I loved trying Dome and Enclave when it first started, and then I very quickly realized, oh, you're just going to take a very small amount of things out of my inventory, pay me a small little bonus on top from this basket, and then you're going to do cutscenes, and then I disengage. So for those of you hanging out on stream, I'm just now finishing my Dome and Enclave because it really didn't keep me long term, because I didn't feel I had any player agency. So my one ask of that content is, can we have some agency around what I develop, what I build, or how I interact with that content, and it's not just a linear line that I'm progressing through at my own pace. That's for me personally. Speaking of kind of how my personal journey goes, battle adjustments. We know there's a stat squish incoming. I've lived through stat squishes in multiple games and big balances. Most notably on this channel, I cover WoW and 14. So obviously WoW's gone through several forms of this, most recently with their full leveling. There are pros and cons to these. They are mostly good for the long-term health of the game, but in the short term, they don't feel equally good for every person. So there will be people hurt by this. There will be people who say they don't want this. They wish they'd never done it. They're going to unsubscribe. But at some point, like the data center split, they have to look at the long-term health of the game and say, these numbers are hurting the ability to balance. These numbers are hurting the ability to track them. They're getting so big that it's starting to create bugs and create issues for the server and packet loss. They're starting to make things like flyover text, which is meant to be informative, hard to read because it's got so many freaking digits on it. It's getting to the point where it's doing more harm than good, and yes, it's going to hurt to fix it, but it's only going to hurt more the longer we wait, and it's beginning to cause problems. So sooner rather than later is the time to fix that, as soon as you know it's a problem, and it seems like now's that time for them. So they've decided to do a stat squish. They made it clear over and over. They explained in a billion ways of detail that you are not going to feel weaker in current content. Then you're not going to feel any weaker in 6.0 than you do in 5.0. But the numbers are going to be smaller. But the health pools are going to be smaller too for the enemies. So the whole thing is getting scaled back. It's just a ratio game. So potencies across the board. Now this will be paired with potency adjustments and job adjustments and new skills being added for jobs. So if your job gets a nerf this expansion and ends up on the weaker end of the balance curve, it may feel like the stat squish affected you more. Those are two separate things going on simultaneously. So I'm not saying that the stat squish can't negatively impact certain people, but I am saying that, like, keep in mind there's two things going on here. We're getting a new version of the jobs. We're getting a re-release of jobs. Some jobs may get major overhauls, like Summoner and Monk, and I think last time Machinist got one of the biggest ones. We may see reworks. We may see slight reworks, but that's separate, and the stat squish just happens to be happening at the same time. It's not bad news. It's good for the long-term health of the game. The fact that they're not just going to let this be something to continue to hotfix and deal with is a sign that they don't want this game to end at the end of 6.0, that they want to pave the way for future expansions. So this is a sign that they would make a controversial structural change like this is a good sign for the long-term health of the game. A good sign for the long-term health of the game is the fact that they're saying, you know what, let's deal with the armory chest. Let's remove the belt slot and let's add more rings. Let's add more primaries. That tells you, okay, we see pain points. That one's not as big of a deal because they're not actually adding to the total number of slots, but it was still nice to see. The data center travel, I think, is good for the long-term health of the game. Even if it was ending, just giving the people the ability to get to more like-minded individuals, so you're not just bound by what the people on your server or on your data center or on your data center want to do, like your individual, Aether versus Primal versus Crystal, or what you EU people and JP people. The data center splits was really controversial last time around, moving to 3 NA instead of 2. I know impacted a lot of people, and this kind of brings people back together. So that's really exciting. Probably good news for people that have been maintaining alts only for the aspect of doing it socially. So that's really nice. From here, they talked about timelines. So we know that April 13th will be 5.5. 5.5 will start April 13th. And so if I look at my calendar here, that is the second Tuesday of April. So I assume the last Tuesday of March will be our next live letter portion, because I'm talking about, right now we're just talking about the first thing here, but like this all impacts it. So we'll get most likely another live letter around the end of March. We'll go in mid-April, we'll go into the new patch. The PS5 beta version will go live at that point. We will then go about 6 weeks, give or take, to have a weekend, the second or third, depending on how the third weekend of May, the 15th and 16th, we're going to have our Fanfest. This is going to be totally free, totally digital. They talked about trying to have a live version for people in JP, but for us NA and EU folks, where most of the people who speak English live, this is going to be digital. It's going to be the only component possible to this, no matter what. Totally free. There will be ways to support it, such as buying the T-shirt, buying the mounts, buying the minions. The lunar 8-person mount, the lunar whale mount. That looks really cool. That will happen, and then at the end of May, let's assume it's the last Tuesday of the month. I don't know. May 25th, we'll go into 5.55. That will be the last of the story for this expansion, because the story will be split over 2 parts. One part on April 13th, another part at the end of May, and that will send us into 5.55. We are not getting an ultimate this expansion. It will be with 6.1, with that Ishgard housing. So that's going to be a big patch for people of all kinds. So I'm really excited about where the game's headed. Do I, of course, have parts of this I wish had worked out differently? I'm sure everybody does, including the dev team. A lot of the delays were not their fault. They're just making the best of a bad situation. Maybe we can talk more about the negative aspects of this in a video on its own, so that people that want to avoid that can. But yeah, it's disappointing. It's disappointing they've long since confirmed that this game is supposed to come to Xbox, and that we're still not getting that announcement. It's disappointing that Ultimate got delayed out of the expansion. Makes me wonder, are we just getting 2 next expansion? So we've kind of been denied one Ultimate, or are we now getting 3 next expansion to kind of catch us back up? Why they picked melee DPS, I don't know how that works out for the balance of the game. I don't know. I have a lot of questions, and not all of them are positive, but overall, the content is very positive. It's headed in a very good direction, and I'm really, really excited. I think this is awesome for the long-term health of the game, and I think it's a great year to be a Final Fantasy XIV player, either for the first time, a returning time, or a long-time player that's excited to see kind of some resolution within a game that isn't ending. You'll be able to continue playing. It's just going to kind of bring this chapter of your life to a close when we talk about your in-game character, and then from here we'll be moving on. So it should be apologized profusely for the ultimate delay, and yeah, it's disappointing. I'm not an Ultimate raider, but I do love taking part in kind of watching the world first and all that. I think it's important for the community, and seeing that is something that I'm of course really disappointed with. Especially knowing it did make it to 70% completion, the Dragon Song War Ultimate, and so it's disappointing to say the least. But I think that's my overall impressions of the event. If you want to see more just specific summary, make sure I didn't, anything I didn't mention there. I tried to kind of just briefly go through everything. It was, of course, a 2-hour event, so every time we tell this, we may hit it a little differently because we're summing up 2 hours in 20, 30 minutes. And then from there, if you want to see Brian and I bounce off each other's thoughts, that video will be live over on Work to Game. If not before this, time is weird. I've already recorded it, so I know what's in it, but it'll be there when it is there. We've got a lot to talk about over the next days and weeks. We'll start with very big general stuff, catch everybody up, and then we'll start drilling down on the parts that meant the most to us and kind of blow those up and spend a little bit longer talking about individual things to see if we can get down into some nitty gritty and talk, and it will very quickly move into speculation, guessing, logical guessing, or just wild guessing territory. So just keep in mind, speculation is very fun. Hype is a heck of a drug, and it's going to be a really, really exciting time to be a 14 player, but keep those based in reality, keep those based in what we were actually told. And while it's fun to speculate about what if scenarios, keep the fact and the speculation separate as much as possible, because that does very quickly move us to territory that could get people where they expect something to be a certain way, because we said, well, what if? And somebody goes, yeah, they'll probably do that. And somebody else goes, oh, they're definitely doing that. And then now we're over here and we're saying this thing's going to be there for sure. And then it gets removed, right? It doesn't get delivered. And we're like, what? They removed it. And they're like, we never said that. And like, the community built this piece of content that was never going to exist. So just keep that in mind this season. And keep in mind that as we go into the next sections and we start to learn about job adjustments, of course, we'll naturally compare them to Shadowbringers content, because that's the content we have. But without the future content, it's hard to know for sure which jobs will be the winners and losers of next expansion as far as balance goes. And so just keep in mind, while it may look like your job is ruined and it may be on the weaker end, we don't know anything till we know anything. So try to focus on the positive. Yes, we'll put out videos around the negative, because it is important that people have a chance to vent that and understand that there are aspects of this aren't positive, but try to realize that relative to the whole, the vast majority of this is very, very good news for both the short-term and long-term health of this game. So hopefully this all kind of got you guys caught up. This is just a channel where I talk about mostly Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft, looking at adding more games in the future. And really the only thing that binds all this stuff together is that they're all going to be tied to gaming, kind of.